This is the Drake Insights Podcast, your weekly dose of cutting-edge senior living marketing insights. Join me, your host, Natasha Drake, for bold ideas, proven strategies, and inspiring stories straight from the experts. Tune in and let's conquer the senior living marketing landscape together. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Drake Insights Podcast. I'm your host, Natasha Drake from Drake Strategic. Let's get started. On today's episode, I am joined by Allison Olson, who is a statistician and an expert in data science. She has almost 25 years of experience in data science and analytics. Last year, she spoke at Smash, if you were there, and we talked about specifically hyper-targeting audiences with growing data privacy regulations. And so today, we're going to discuss how to master audience targeting using the data science and analytics. So it's not just mailing lists, not just targeting. It's truly using the best data, your data, to ensure you're getting the right leads at the right time and to be more efficient with your advertising spend. But before we get into that, welcome Allison, if you can introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks for having me, Natasha. Yes, you did an excellent job introducing me. I have about 25 years of experience in analytics, data science, and just general problem solving. That's my passion. That's my love. I also have 2 degrees in statistics, specifically within the field of marketing. I also, for frame of reference here, I am an oldest daughter, and I have my mom is in a nursing home, and so it's important for folks to know that I have been through and made those decisions for a very important family member, and so I think that connects me to as well to this industry.
Thank you. We're so happy to have you on because I think this is really important, especially now in the senior living industry with all of the data coming in with interactive tools. This is the perfect time to really talk about this and make sure we're really harnessing and using that data. So before we get started, can you first explain, what does this mean? You know, this is more than just buying lists. Can you explain, what do we mean by data and analytics?
Yeah. So what we mean is, honestly, we have been sold a bag of goods as marketers. We have been told that the best we can get for trying to find new leads is these generalized personas, right? You know, there is Mary, the oldest daughter. She has young kids. She's a working professional. You know, these very, very vague descriptions. We have this older couple who is trying to make a decision around assisted living. We have, these very, very vague descriptions. Sometimes they're given names, and I'm using quotes here because sometimes they're given general names. They're given general, pictures for our images. But the problem with that is then that goes to like a list provider, and they go and just get this swath of people. And everyone is not the same. The value of each of these people are not the same. And we know so much more now. And as you were talking about, with the advances in technology, with all of the new information that we're getting from the sales tools, from the chatbots, from all of that now, we know so much more. So if we can harness the data in the right way, we can be much more efficient. So instead of going for the general Marys of the world, right? These oldest daughters, these decision makers, within there are very specific people that could be targeted and easily found with the data that these senior living organizations already own. So that's the leveling up that we can do with the hyper targeting of utilizing the data.
Well, so I was going to say, how can specifically senior living or the senior living industry tap into this for better targeting? Can you talk more about that?
So what you do is you take your existing data from your CRM database. It's really important to have the full data. So people that you mailed that did what you wanted, right, and became leads, people that you mailed that did not. And I say mailed, this is also hopefully once you get hyper targeting to the next level, you should be able to use this for every channel. And when I say every channel, Natasha, I mean TV. You can personalize everything now. So through CTV, I can submit an ad that just goes to you, or I could even submit a different ad to you and a different ad to me, right? It is that everything now has moved to the digital world where everything can be hyper targeted.
And I think to add to that, the TV advertising, at least in the senior living industry with the online TV, is new. It is a new place that senior living
Yeah.
has been advertising in. So that's really important. I'm glad you brought that up because it's important to realize it's not just your digital paid ads and your mailing lists. There are so many other channels, like you're mentioning, that you can utilize this data for.
That's correct. I mean, really, it's to the point where if you're doing an ad at all, it should be hyper targeted to whomever, because you specifically selected that creative and that message for a certain type of person. We need to make sure that is going to only those individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And then another way to level that up is to actually know of those potential leads, which ones would be of more value. Right. So if if there are different cases where, marginally you would bring in more, right? So let's say like a 2-bedroom versus a 1-bedroom. If that is something you're trying to get, or if you have more vacancies in a 1-bedroom or a studio, whatever the goal is, you can hyper target to get those specific people that will be the best value for the return of your ad dollars.
And that's really important because that's something that I get asked a lot. Can we have specific strategies on our 1-bedrooms? We're not selling our 1-bedrooms. We're not
Yeah.
selling our studios. And a lot of times what happens is they take this list, whatever that they've purchased, and they just narrow it down to, okay, well, let's just pull out these specific singles. But here you're saying with this data, you can actually hyper target and personalize even further to those people that would be interested in the 1-bedroom. So that's really important, I think, specifically for senior living industry, for everyone to hear that when you're trying to sell, like you're saying, those specific floor plans, there's a way to really hyper target on all channels to find that right person.
That we can't necessarily see with our naked eyes, right? So it's not as obvious as just, okay, these are single individuals. There might be single individuals that have tons of family or have tons and tons of friends that they want to have that extra bedroom for if they're coming to visit, if have the need for space, and others that might really be wanting to downsize and to have a 1-bedroom. And so it's not as simple as what's their income level, what's their marital status. It is not
Mm-hmm.
that simple. And so it's the combination of all of the variables together. It might actually be, and I'm just going to totally make this up, but interested in golf, pickleball, and baking.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be those 3 together. And depending upon how interested they are in each of those, that might help to be that specific target audience. But it's never going to be as easy as us looking in the data and finding it. We actually need statistics to pull it out and weight each of these variables to tell us what's the most important and what actually means they would enjoy living in the 1-bedroom. That is what they're looking for versus these simplistic, simple income restricted type of qualifiers.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So typically, I know not everyone's doing this, but typically over the years in senior living, the way it's done is like you're saying, operators, communities will export the data, by each community from their CRM. They
Yep.
send it to their list vendor. They have some conversations, like you said, about some high level behaviors, maybe home value, income, whatever it
Yep.
might be, right? And then they purchase a list based on that. And so what you're saying is, I want to make sure I'm clarifying for the listeners, it's more than that. What we're doing doesn't just scratches the surface of the extent that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's much more than that. And the key, Natasha, is they have the data.
Mm-hmm.
They have the data. So when I look at it, they're sitting on a gold mine. They're sitting on a gold mine of information. And especially that they've already bought all of these lists that they've already bought. And they know who responded, who didn't respond. Of that alone, you can do significant modeling. Of the leads that then ended up converting, you can do modeling there and score your leads. So who do you spend the time with, right? Like who do the salespeople take the time to call versus email versus send a magnet versus send a postcard, right? So just thinking financially, because you might still want to target all leads, but who do you spend the most money on and who's going to bring in the most value? These are easy things that mathematically we can pull out from the data that already exists.
Right. I think that's something that maybe we're a little bit behind in this industry specifically because right now in senior living, interactive online tools are growing, like you mentioned. So there's so much with AI now, the chatbots, we have surveys, financial calculators, interactive forms on the floor plans. I mean,
Yep.
and it's great. I mentioned that in my website episode. It's fantastic. We're increasing our conversion rates with this, getting higher quality leads. But the concern is that we're getting so much data.
Yep.
And I know in my experience prior, I don't really feel like we were using that data to the full extent. Who's compiling it? Who's analyzing it? How are you using this data? Is it just sitting on those separate dashboards? It's another thing is a lot of times some go right into the CRM, some have their own dashboards. And so someone has to compile it, analyze it, which isn't everyone's strong suit, and look at it and figure out what
Yep.
to do with it. So how can we better use this, your own data? Like you're saying, you
Yep.
have incredible data from all these sources. How can we better utilize this?
Yes, no, that's a very good point. So the one thing I will say to make us all feel better is of all of the companies I have worked with in my years of experience, I've actually only found one that maximizes all of their data. So the biggest thing though is you have the gold mine, you have the
Mm-hmm.
data. And all of those things that you mentioned continue to collect the data from all of these different components. They all can be utilized, and we can just get smarter and smarter and smarter. We can get better around prospects. We can get better around ranking our leads. We can get better around knowing who's going to convert and be the highest value, right? And what those people look like, how to find additional people that look like that makes us smarter on all of our information, our list buys, our sales team focusing their energy and time, all of that. But yes, it's very, very common to basically have dashboards and have that be the only solution, right? So we're simplifying something to the point where we're not utilizing it to its full capacity. And dashboards are critical. I lead one of my 5 teams is data visualization, right? So they are important. It is important to have dashboards, but it can go much, much further than that. Also, like what you were talking about these silos, that's very, very common. So even with the same data, this one team will pull it out, visualize it for a certain report that they need for their thing. This other team will pull out what they need for their answers. That's why it is important to have analytics and data science folks specifically to overarchingly look at all of your data to make sure that everything is maximized, right? Ad dollars, that's a lot of money. And you need to know exactly where it's going and what you're getting in return from it and what channels are doing that. What channels, what specific tactics within those channels. And then if it gets to TV, what shows, what genres, all of that, everything can be measurable. So the thing that I would say is, you were asking, how do they know if they're using it to the best of their ability,
Mm-hmm.
right? Can you answer all those questions? Exactly how much did this tactic bring in, right? Knowing that these, especially within digital marketing, it's all double counted.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's double counted. So nothing's additive. You cannot take last touch from Facebook, add it with last touch from search, add it to last touch from whatever DSP you use, right? So for display, native, all of that, OTT. So let's say you run it through the trade desk, you cannot add all of those together. So it starts to become a problem as far as cross-channel measurement,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there are ways to do all of that. And so the key is if you don't truly know, if you don't know the value of a lead versus another lead, if they're not ranked for you, if you don't know exactly how to go out and get prospects other than with general personas, there's a way to do it better. If you do not know how to measure whatever it is, so if the question was, did this last mailing work? And you don't have the quantification on that, that's your answer.
Right. And this, I think this kind of makes sense, but this is going to save you a lot of money in the long run too. So, I think a lot of times operators can be nervous about spending money on data and analytics, right?
Yep.
It's a lot of work. Who do we hire to do all of this for us? But in the long run, it's going to save a lot of money because you're able to hyper target your audience, what you're saying, and
Yep.
target the right people who are more likely to convert and move in at a higher conversion rate than blasting it out to lots of people and getting less return on your investment.
That's exactly. And the one thing that I would say is if you are nervous about that and you bring in any analytics partner, have them quantify it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Any tool that I've produced, I'm able to back into, okay, here's a general number for you. And then, especially once you get the results, you should definitely be able to say, if you implement these recommendations, you will pay off the purchase of this tool by X date. So everything should be measurable and quantifiable.
And you're able to then, just because I'm thinking in the real world, how communities are using this. So, say they were to bring someone in to do the data and analytics, really tell them who their persona is. You then can partner with them with their list vendor or whoever it is, if it's
Exactly.
outsourced, and help them with that process too, right?
Exactly. Yep. You want someone, especially to have somebody third party is kind of the best, right? Because they can help evaluate your ad agencies. They
Mm-hmm.
can help evaluate your list vendors. They can help assist you with all of that. So the suggestion would be either in-house or third party so that you're doing the evaluation correctly.
Yeah. And I think the most important thing I want to make sure I'm sharing with the listeners today, with my experience in senior living, is just the fact that I feel like, and I mentioned it earlier, but we're just not using all the data we have.
Yep.
And back when I was doing sales, we didn't have as much of this data. So now I can't imagine having all of this at their fingertips and not knowing what to do with. So making sure we're using it, not just to look at it and talk about it on monthly and quarterly annual
Yep.
planning, right? To just kind of let's pull all the dashboards and let's look at it once a year. No, looking at it ongoing to adjust not even our targeting, but even our strategies, our marketing tactics, what types of events we're doing, where we're hosting certain things. Like it can really be that
Yep.
hyper focused on it's helping you make better, smarter, strategic decisions for your marketing planning every month, who you're targeting for which channel. Like my mind's just going of all of the
Mhm.
ways this can help you to use data you already have. That's what's so important too. A lot of these operators have hundreds of communities across the country, nationwide. How much data they all have to be able to compile this and help their communities, save money long term. And so one of the last questions I did want to ask too, though, is how do we prove? I know you mentioned that. How do we prove it's working?
That's an excellent question. Whoever that you have do the analytics and data science for this should be able to quantify everything.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that's really cool too is if you bring someone in, if you did a test, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and you never knew if it worked, this person can still look back historically on the
Mm,
data and tell you if it worked and quantify if it worked. Of course, it depends on, a whole bunch of caveats. Was the test set up correctly? Were other things happening? All of that. But there's so much rich information about historic data that can give us guidance to just continue to be sharper and sharper, to hyper personalize. Like you said, once you find the exact right people, so not even these generalized personas, the exact right individuals that fall into your different buckets of messaging, right? So if it's a decision maker that would not end up being a resident, what type of message are we giving to them? Where are they? Are they on Facebook? Oh, they're not on Facebook. Maybe now they're more on TikTok or Instagram, or, they're
mhm,
somewhere else and we need to find them a different way. Okay, the potential future resident, okay, they are on Facebook, but we need to talk to them in this certain manner. That these are the things that once you know exactly who these people are, the creative and messaging starts to fall in place more. Like you were saying, events, you can geolocate these individuals. So
mhm,
once you know exactly who we should be targeting,
mhm,
you can look at maps and geolocate where they are to be closer to them for these different events. You can find out that, hey, the bulk of these folks are more into, Pilates than yoga. And man, we've been doing all these yoga classes at our
mhm,
communities. It sounds like now it's moving to Pilates. Let's bring in a Pilates instructor. Let's see how that changes things. Let's put Pilates on the next brochure that we do and just see how it does. And so again, all of these things, and the see how it does isn't in general, it can be quantified.
Mhm.
Same brochure, switch out yoga for Pilates. You should be able to quantify exactly how much that change brought in.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it, testing. That's something that I think a lot of times operators get nervous about because testing, that seems like more money. We're going to do different
Mhm.
things. But it can be as simple as that, looking at results from an event, making slight adjustments, making slight changes in if you learn that your persona, like you're saying, is more interested in yoga, just swapping some photos, like little adjustments, tests. I don't know if you want to talk more at all about that testing and how operators can be testing their marketing strategies, but it's really important. Otherwise, you'll never know if what's working and how to adjust who you're targeting based on those results.
Well, analytics professionals can help, right? They can help you set up tests because some tests need to happen, in isolation, right? Some can actually happen overlapped with others, right? So if you have a whole bunch of questions that need to be answered, I think that's step one. You just list out all the questions. We want to know what content should be in these different brochures. Where should we have these events? What should we be focused on at these events? That all of those questions, and then someone can actually map out a testing plan for you. And I love to do it quarter by quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, I notice that by the second quarter, they start like adding questions to the list because they're like, oh my gosh, we finally know. We finally know the answer to this, and this. Okay, now we'll do more and more. And so the difference is when you set up a test, you leave the test knowing it worked or it didn't work. Or maybe it worked, but it didn't work well enough to meet our current goals, but it could work if our goals weren't so lofty in the future. And so there's components like that, but you leave these tests knowing. So, if a senior living organization does not have an analytics team and they maybe don't have money for a third party analytics team, my suggestion when setting up your own tests is simplicity. So write out the questions, prioritize them in what you want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's yoga versus Pilates, if it's that
Mm-hmm.
simple, do a test like that. Do it at the same time. Send out the brochures to a random group. This group gets it with yoga, random sample gets it with Pilates, but at the same time, so there's no seasonality issues, there's nothing else going on time frame wise. And then just see. And that would be my suggestion if you're not going more complex and using a third party.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to explain a lot of times when operators and communities are buying these mailing lists. They're probably thinking in their head right now as they're listening to us, yeah, we do that. We do behaviors. We do pinpoint that. I want to make sure though that I clarify that this is using your own data that you're
Yep.
getting, your own data from all the different sources and analyzing it to come up with the personas. I just want to make sure that that's clear because sometimes it gets a little foggy. Like, well, we do use a vendor and we do focus on behaviors, and that's a great first step. But fully utilizing all of your data to know who is the person, what is the persona that we're trying to go after, if I'm saying that correctly. Is that
Yeah.
right?
So and the one clarification I would say is we are not developing personas. We are going beyond
Mm-hmm.
personas. So personas are those vague things that are, like I said, marry the oldest daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of that, it is going to be Allison Olson is an oldest daughter. Okay, don't go for Natasha Drake. She is not, even though she fit within the Mary,
Mm-hmm.
umbrella, she is not at that stage in life. She's not making those decisions. Take her out of your advertising. Bring in this person, bring in Joe Smith. Joe Smith isn't an oldest daughter, but Joe Smith is making these decisions for his family. This is where he's at. And so it goes beyond personas to this
Mm-hmm.
hyper targeting and hyper personalization where we don't just know these individuals will be leads. we know they will be better leads
Right.
for whatever is needed. If the one bedrooms are what needs to sell, these are the leads that will get you to one bedrooms versus the leads that will get you to a studio, leads that will get you to a two bedroom. It's very, very specific, and we can
Mm-hmm.
hyper target these individuals. And then once you know who they are, you know the exact channels they're on, and you actually can find them specifically and target them specifically.
Yeah.
And then the testing gets exciting because
Yeah.
then it's what ad does it take to specifically get me, Allison Olson,
Mm-hmm.
to convert?
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying that. I think
Yeah.
that can be a little vague sometimes in our industry, so I appreciate you clarifying that. And like you said, it's also fluid. I love that. Like it can be hyper targeted depending on what you're planning or what, like you said, your question or your
Yeah.
problem is at that time. It's not just let's buy one list for the year and that's just who we're going to go after. It can be fluid. As I've mentioned before, the marketing plan and the marketing strategy is fluid. We know your occupancy, your attrition, the operations issues and concerns you have are fluid. Your marketing strategy and your targeting, your hyper targeting also will be fluid. So I appreciate you going through that. Are there any key takeaways that you want to make sure the listeners remember from today?
Yes, I would say number one, you're sitting on a gold mine. You're sitting on a gold mine of data. Make sure that you either have somebody internally or third party that can dig into this data and pull out all of this rich information. If you do not know exactly who to target, and I'm saying individuals, not a generalized persona, if
Mm-hmm.
you do not know the exact individuals for prospects, then we need to be doing this. If you do not have your leads ranked to where who is going to bring in the highest value and be the highest likely to convert, you can use this information to do so. So I would say that's the first thing. The second thing is if you do not have currently, if you are not getting answers to, yes, this worked, no, it didn't work, here's how much it worked, here's how much it didn't work, and have the quantifications around all of your questions, then you're probably needing to level up the analytics and data science at your organization. And then the third piece is understanding what each channel is bringing in, and then the tactics and creative within those channels. And keeping in mind that, especially with digital channels, with direct mail, you cannot sum them, right? And so you need a different way to measure. Each of these platforms are fine in a silo in themselves. They're fine to look at trending of Facebook over time. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Did it go up? Did it go down? The issue comes in though when you're trying to look across channel and when you have budget cuts or added budget. And then you need to justify, right, to senior leadership, here's why we are moving money to Facebook or away from Facebook. And so the quantification around all of this, it's just amazing, especially to have in your pocket, right? To be able to say, this is why. This is
Mm-hmm.
exactly why. This is our ROI on that channel versus this channel. That is why we're investing more dollars, but we will only invest until this point, and then we won't invest in there. We'll either change our strategy or we'll move dollars to another bucket. And so to have all of that information is critical for operators to do their job successfully. And I'm telling you, you can. You've got all the data to do it.
Yeah. And I'm going to say the marketing listeners know how hard it is when we're asking, for more money because the marketing budgets many times are one of the highest, right? As the operators are looking at it. And so a lot of times you're making recommendations or you're getting them from your agency, but you need to have that data and the analytics to prove it. And that will help you as you're trying to ask for the more money to focus on those channels. And I did want to also add timing right now, as well, as I've mentioned with the boomers now in our industry. Also, people aren't really thinking about their adult children are different too, right? So very different generations we're now going after than we were less than 5 years ago. Honestly, it's changing that rapidly. This is more important than ever that we are truly understanding not just our prospect, but also the new adult child and the different channels, like you mentioned. So it was always just focusing on Facebook. There's so many other social media platforms that we need to be focusing on gathering the analytics from. So perfect timing right now to really get more information. If you're interested in learning more and working with Allison to help you with your data and targeting, please reach out to Allison or myself, because this is the perfect time, especially as we're going into budget season, to understand, are we putting our money the right places? Are we being the most efficient with our money as well in the right channels, and what's working for us? So is there anything more, Allison, that you wanted to add before we leave today?
No, just there's so much potential. And remember, it is tougher to collect the data than to actually analyze it. So the fact that you're sitting on a whole bunch of data and maybe haven't fully utilized it, that's exciting. That's an exciting point to be in. A lot of things that can come from it.
Well, thank you so much for being on today. Like I mentioned earlier, this is super important right now in this time. So I appreciate you being on the podcast. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on the Drake Insights podcast. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye. If you enjoyed watching the podcast today, please follow me and subscribe so you're notified for the next podcast. And if you have any questions or want to talk after about anything that Drake Strategic can provide for you, please reach out to me, call me, email me, or visit our website at drakestrategic.com.